Hey everyone, my name is nicholastsemrad, and I'm going to walk you through a reharmonization of a tune that I used to play almost every Sunday at my church called "Oh Give Thanks." So as we listen to this first part, you'll notice that I don't really do much because I wanted to play it a little close to the vest and give you kind of a benchmark for what chords I was operating from. So the first time through the A section, I'm basically just playing the regular chords. Now, as we approach this second time through the A section, I'm going to start doing something that I do quite often during reharms, where I will take a melody note and change what the bass note is, and then kind of throw a chord into those parameters. I have this belief in reharming that any melody note that you play can be combined with any bass note. So for instance, if I have a C in the melody, I can play a C in the bass and there's a chord that works for that. I can play a B in the bass and there's a chord that works for that. I can play a B flat in the bass and there's a chord that works for that. There are no impossible combinations. And so oftentimes during reharmonization, I will take a melody note, and I will replace the bass note that should have been there with something that maybe takes it out of the key, or maybe just gives it a different context even remaining in the same key. So as I get to this G and the D in the melody of "Oh Give Thanks," G, and then the D right after it, if you notice on the thanks, I'm actually playing a form of E minor. I mean, it's a kind of a weird E minor, but E minor nonetheless. And then when I have D in the melody, I have an A. In terms of why I made those particular choices, it's just because I could. Again, no bass note is impossible for these melody notes, so I just picked something that was different than the E flat that I was playing, and E was only a half step away, so it's just something close. So if you want to experiment with other types of this, just stop on a melody note of a song. So stop on something like "Oh Give Thanks," and just pick A in the bass and see if you can come up with a chord that has A in the bass, G in the melody, or pick D flat in the bass, blah, blah, blah. So on and so on. It basically just gives you a way out of the normal chords of the tune that you're playing. So there, I end up going with the regular B flat and D, E minor over thanks, and then a lot of times what I do with this bass movement as well as, it seems like I'm just picking random wrong bass notes, but actually I end up walking down to a particular goal. I have a chord that I want to sort of autocorrect on, and this is what I'm doing in this scenario. So if you notice here, I'm actually walking down and aiming for that D7 chord, which if you listen through to the first time I played the A section, the D7 chord was one of the quote normal changes. And so I'm using these other bass notes to walk towards that D, and at that point I end up getting back into playing the tune regularly for a second. Okay, so after this part, the next tricky thing that I do is right before I play the C7 chord, you notice I do a little run where my left hand plays A chromatically up to C, my right hand plays C sharp chromatically up to E. So all I'm doing there is I'm again aiming for a chord. I'm aiming for that C7 chord that I played in the original A section, and I am basically just saying I want to play a few things to walk into that chord. So this A thing that I'm doing, this A walk up, ends up just being that C chord, but I'm coming up from underneath it by playing the same voicing a few times. So A and C sharp is just 1 and 3 in A, and then I end up actually playing 1 and 3 in B flat, 1 and 3 in B, and then 1 and 3 in C. So I'm walking up into the C7. Okay, the last tricky thing I do in this A section is I top it off with ending right before I play the B flat chord. I'm doing kind of a surrounding note reharmonization of the last chord. So right before I play the B flat major that part ends on, I'm again going back to this idea of keeping a melody note but changing what the bass notes are. So I end up, while that B flat is my melody note, instead of the B flat and the bass that I should play there, I'm going to say, no, I want to play B something, so B bass with B flat melody, and then A bass with B flat melody. So there I end up playing a version of a B major 7 because B in the bass, B flat up top, that's one of my options. And then the chord voicing right before the B flat, I'm playing an A7 in my left hand, so A, C sharp, G, I think is what I did there. And then a F sharp triad in my right. So it's kind of like an F sharp triad over A. There might be something better to call that, maybe A13 flat 9. But regardless, it's just something that has A in the bass and B flat in the melody. You could come up with a couple different options for either of those, but I just wanted to have those bass notes surround the B flat. Okay, so now as we're coming into this B section of the tune, or the chorus, whatever you want to call it, I end up playing kind of standard little churchy tricks for the E flat and the B flat over D things. And then the next reharm part that I get into is when I play, it looks like I'm playing an E major 7. Now, yet again, I'm going to this vibe of keeping the melody note that should be there, changing the bass pattern. And if you notice this bass pattern, I play something like E major 7, D flat over E flat, a version of a D13, and then walking down, doing those same kind of voicings until I get to G minor over B flat, which, again, even though it's a B flat in the bass, it's still G minor because G minor that scale contains a B flat. And that's something that I do a lot of times in church songs, is play a regular chord like a G minor, but put the 3 of that chord, so or in this case the minor third of that chord, into the bass. I do that a lot during praise and worship music, where if the song is just an F major, sometimes I'm going to resolve to just F major over A because it's the same chord, but it gives it kind of a different flavor. And that's what I'm doing here, is I'm resolving to that G minor, but to make it a little bit more interesting, I'm not playing the G minor in the bass. Okay, and now when we get to the C chord and you hear kind of a walk-up motion, I'm sort of flipping the script on this reharm strategy a little bit. In the song so far, we've been taking the melody and kind of putting new bass information under it. And in this situation, I'm actually using a bass movement and putting new melodic information on top. So I end up going to that C, and then the next bass note in the regular part of the tune would be an F. So I'm taking the bass and just walking it up by going D, E flat, E in order to get to that F. So the bass is actually leading the movement, and then what I'm doing is kind of playing a little bit dissonant of a chord that's the same voicing on all of those bass notes. So I end up playing this version of, it's like a B flat triad over a D7, and then I'm just moving it up in half steps a couple times until I get to the F that I would normally play there. Now, once we land on the F, now we're in a situation where we can kind of 2-5-1 into the chord that we're supposed to be in. So if that B section or chorus, whatever we're calling it, is supposed to start on E flat, in order to 2-5-1 into it, you would play F something, B flat something, something dominant probably in both cases, before you get to the E flat. So here I'm playing, a version of F minor 7, and then the B flat I'm playing is just a very dissonant 5 voicing there, if you're relating the 5 to the E flat that we're supposed to go to. So you can see it spelled out in the video, but it's something like a B flat 13 flat 9 sharp 11. I mean, again, all these chords get a little hazy when you try and figure out what to call them, but that's what I would call it. So now for this last section of the tune, I'm going to continue with the strategy that we've been doing this whole time, where we keep the melody note and then we substitute a different bass note in just to make it work. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, is there any particular method to the madness of choosing the bass note here? And most of the time, I hope this doesn't upset you, but most of the time, no. A lot of these times I'm really just experimenting by saying, okay, my hand is close to something that I should play. Why don't I play the next thing that I shouldn't? And then the part that makes it kind of work is that I have these aims or these goals. So in this situation, it just so happens that if I keep that G in the melody and play an A flat major 7 there, that A flat major 7 to G minor actually just kind of resolves really well. It's not the correct chords of the tune, but it has a really clean sounding vibe to it. And then all these walk-ups afterwards, I'm aiming again for that D7, to where, if you notice, I start kind of moving chromatically at times, aiming towards that D, and each time the melody note moves, I'm choosing another bass note that's getting me towards that D7. So once I get to the D7, then I'm kind of in a boat where I can just end the tune the correct way. So again, I know a lot of this might seem random, but the gist of what I'm doing is keeping the melody the same, or the bass notes the same if there's a particular bass line, but most of the time in this song it's been the melody. And we're just replacing the bass notes. So whatever melody note I have, whatever bass note I have, I'm saying, all right, let's take that bass note and just put something else in there and find a chord for that. A drill, if you want to get really talented at being able to have an instant chord for every bass note, melody note scenario, because this kind of process, at least in my eyes, is a really common aspect of reharmonization, is just being able to take whatever bass position and melody position you're in and figuring out a path through it. What I would say is do these common tone exercises. I talk about these in my lessons quite a bit, which if you want to get deeper into this, please hit me up for a private lesson. But, do these exercises where you pick a melody note. Again, stay with C as the melody, and you're moving the bass notes either up or down chromatically. So C in the melody, C in the bass. Okay, find a chord that works with. C major 7, C triad, you could do C sus13, and then walk down chromatically to B in the bass, but keep that C in the melody and start trying to find chords that fit there. You could play a B7 flat 9. Okay, then B flat in the bass. You have B flat major 7 with a 9 on top. The whole time I'm keeping the same melody note, just because I want to train myself mentally to always have something that I can throw into any bass note and melodic note parameter. So hopefully this wasn't too confusing. I know these theories can get a little dense and I'm not always the greatest at explaining them, but hopefully this one helped you. I'm going to include a email address that you can hit me up if you want to purchase the MIDI content for this particular reharmonization. And again, if you want to get deeper into any of these tunes, there's 1,000 different ways to reharmonize them, and I can show you some other processes that get a little bit more in depth to the theories privately. So hit me up. Hopefully this helps. Again, my name is Nicholastsemrad, and thank you for spending time watching this reharm lesson. Thanks, guys.